I have a dream. Martin Luther King Jr.'s immortal words.
Witness Dr. Martin Luther King's March on Washington speech as an intern back in 1963. I dreamed about doing big things to help my state and our country.
The White House staged an impressive ceremony today, the President and Dr. King's widow walking into the Rose Garden together in an effort to spruce up Mr. Reagan's tattered civil rights image. The President signed the bill, which he had so strongly opposed, making Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday. And he delivered remarks before some 200 invited guests, which, while not quite calling Dr. King a great American, were designed to honor him.
Think of President Trump as the Martin Luther King of healthcare.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Has the White House in any way addressed the substance of Coretta Scott King's criticism of Sessions from 1986?
Yeah, actually, Sean Spicer today at the press briefing was asked specifically about it, and he believes that King, if she were alive today, she would have a different view of Jeff Sessions. Here's what he said.
I can only hope that if she was still with us today, that after getting to know him and to see his record and his commitment to voting and civil rights, that she would share the same view that Senator Specter did, where he said, although I voted against him getting to know the man that is now, I regret that vote. And I would hope that if she was still with us today, that she would share that sentiment.
Today is the anniversary of the assassination of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I was thinking, like, if he were alive today, I wonder what he'd think about such dismissive comments and about a Democrat Party that believes it can regain power by living in a constant state of protest or racial hatred and denial.
You're hearing a lot about critical race theory. So what is it? This is a form of teaching that teaches our kids that America is systemically racist and that you're either an oppressor or a victim, and judge a person by the color of their skin, not the content of their character.
As the Reverend Dr. King famously said, and he was right, we should judge our fellow citizens by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Mr. President, we need a strong nation with strong citizens who see each other as Americans, not as oppressors or oppressed.
Critical race theory goes against everything Martin Luther King has ever told us. Don't judge us by the color of our skin. And now they're embracing it, right? They're going backwards.
I'm Rayy Vana, and welcome back to Rebel HQ. Keeping in the conservative tradition of whitewashing Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, Charlie Kirk, one of the co-founders of the conservative student group Turning Point USA, claimed that Martin Luther King Jr. was a mixed bag during a debate on critical race theory yesterday.
Caring more about character than skin color, and yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a mixed bag when it came to this stuff.
While Charlie is calling him a mixed bag now, let's see what he had to say about Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy less than 2 months ago at a school board meeting about critical race theory.
I'm disgusted that you are lying to the citizens of this state and the people that pay your salaries. You say critical race theory is not in the school district, and then moments later, you have someone come up and use that word, equity. Just last week, the CUSD Summer Equity Symposium was held, and it was, quote, to create systemic change your leadership thinking. How about addressing implicit bias for student excellence? If you know anything, just a little bit about where these ideas and these phrases come from, you know that this district is stomping on the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.
So which is it, Charlie? Is critical race theory stomping on Martin Luther King's legacy, or is it highlighting what a mixed bag he was? Charlie Kirk has also invoked MLK's name several times on Twitter, implying that he would support Kirk's right-wing stances on modern social issues and civil unrest. Charlie said, Martin Luther King would not have supported BLM Inc. and the violent tactics they have used to burn down our cities. Democrats should stop invoking his legacy until they condemn their arson, rioting, and violence. So you have issues with Democrats invoking Martin Luther King Jr.'s name, but you don't have an issue when your own party does it to justify bigotry, vitriol, and made-up culture war nonsense? Well, I suppose I never really expected someone like Charlie Kirk to be consistent. Charlie Kirk has also tweeted a video of MLK denouncing riots, citing it as evidence that MLK would not support BLM protesters. Kirk shared the video saying, "Wisdom from Dr. King, a great reminder for our country as the left tries to burn it down." The video shows Martin Luther King Jr. saying that riots are socially destructive. I couldn't help but notice that Charlie didn't provide the context for that quote from Martin Luther King Jr., probably because it doesn't fit his narrative. But don't worry, I'll show you what Charlie didn't want you to see.
I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard.
Charlie Kirk doesn't even think that systemic racism is real. It's pretty hard to believe that Martin Luther King Jr. and Charlie Kirk would be fighting on the same side of any issue. Martin Luther King's legacy is one of activism, inspiration, and relentless fighting for justice. The conservative legacy, on the other hand, is one of demonization, hate, and division. Now, I won't pretend that I know what Martin Luther King Jr. would have to say if he were still alive today. But these conservative pundits most certainly don't know either. So don't let them denigrate and whitewash the legacy of one of the most tireless advocates for social justice in American history.